Most people probably imagine a parole and probation officer as someone just waiting for a person to mess up. Somebody watching for one bad move so they can send them right back to jail. But after sitting down with Jesica, that picture felt incomplete almost immediately. She works as a probation officer, and what stood out to me was that the job isn't really built around punishment, the way a lot of people might have assumed. It's built around oversight, judgment, and in a way trying to help people stay out of the system for good. Later on, we'll get into the career day whiteboard to discuss how Jesica rates aspects of this career, like the emotional load, consequence pressure, and autonomy. But first, the actual job itself is more layered than I expected. Jesica didn't come into this line of work because she was looking for some desk job. She actually started as a police officer, and she loved it. But once she had a family, she wanted something a little more stable, a little more safe. She still wanted to be part of the justice system in law enforcement. She just wanted to do it in a way that was a little more behind the scenes. But sometimes this job is on the front lines just as much as police and correction officer positions, because probation and parole officers still puts you in contact with people who've been convicted of serious offenses. You're still dealing with risk. You're dealing with criminal behavior and with people who can absolutely make your day complicated. What surprised Jesica, and honestly what surprised me hearing her talk about it, is that coming from a police background, she still didn't fully understand what the job really was until she got in there. She said once onboarding ended, they basically handed her a full caseload and told her to ask questions if she had any. And pretty quickly she ran into the reality of the work. If somebody isn't compliant, or somebody's using drugs again, or even was picked up on a new charge, the first instinct might be, okay, violate them, send them up. But that's not how it always works. There's a process. There's also supervision and their required approval. Because, see, there are treatment options and other courses that can be taken. There are decisions about whether somebody needs anger management, domestic violence intervention, drug treatment, or whether they're just simply at a point where violation actually makes sense. That was one of the biggest things that came through in our conversation. This isn't just a job where you catch people doing wrong and hammer them for it. There's judgment, but not unlimited judgment. And then there's the paperwork. That was probably one of the clearest, most immediate surprises she had. If you don't like paperwork, this job probably is going to wear you down, and wear you down fast. Every single interaction has to be documented. If you call somebody and they don't answer, document it. If you speak to them, well, that's documented. If you talk to a family member, document it. Because if there's something that may eventually end up in court, it needs to exist on the record. And once you hear her explain that, you realize this job is as much administrative discipline as it is working with people. Her day starts at about 7:45 in the morning and usually runs until 4:30 in the afternoon. There's a morning meeting at around 8:30 so the office can touch base, share any safety concerns, and make sure everyone knows who's coming in that day. After that, the day really gets going. What I found interesting is that there's actually a decent amount of schedule control inside of this structure. She can decide which days are more appointment heavy and which days are more administrative. She can stack meetings in the morning and use the afternoon for all her documentation. So even though the job is rigid in its requirements, there's still some personal control in how you manage the workload. And that probably matters because the caseload sounds like something you can lose control of pretty quickly if you're not organized. She explained that people are supervised at different levels. High-risk cases come in more often than medium risk. Some lower-risk cases can simply be monitored through an app or a virtual check-in. Usually there are office appointments to conduct urinalysis and sometimes home visits, even employment verifications. And it all has to happen on a schedule. That was another big takeaway for me. This isn't a job where being a little sloppy means you just had a bad day. It's in this kind of work, disorganization means things fall through the cracks. Requirements get missed, documentation gets late, and cases get messy. And because you're dealing with the courts and legal deadlines, and most of all, public safety, that matters. Jesica was very clear about the type of person who struggles here. If you think you can coast, you probably won't last. If you're disorganized, this job will expose that quickly. If you don't manage time well, don't follow through, or don't pay attention to detail, the work will pile up on you in a hurry. But on the other hand, the people who do well in this work tend to be hardworking, highly organized, efficient, steady, and able to stay firm without being cold. Now, that phrase came through in many ways over and over again. Firm but fair. Because you can't be so soft that people walk all over you. You also can't be so rigid that you stop seeing the person in front of you. That human side of the job came through strongest when we talked about people dealing with addiction. Jesica said those are often the cases that affect her emotionally the most. Not because she brings the work home with her. She actually seems very good at leaving work at work. But because sometimes you can tell somebody really does want to do better. They get clean. They start moving in the right direction. I mean, you're rooting for them, and then suddenly something happens. Some sort of trauma or a setback, and they slide backwards. Those moments matter because they reveal the emotional tension in the job. You're not just processing paperwork, you're watching people try. Sometimes they fail, but try again. And sometimes you watch them sabotage themselves right in front of you. And yet, Jesica keeps coming back to the same point. Most probation and parole officers are not looking for reasons to throw people back in jail. In fact, one of the biggest misconceptions about the job is exactly that. She said even many of the people coming into the office assume probation officers are there just to catch them messing up. But what she wants people to understand is that the goal is to help them succeed. Use the resources. Get stable. Finish probation and move on with life. She doesn't enjoy writing violations. She doesn't enjoy getting people arrested. She wants them to do well, that eventually they never see each other again. That's a very different picture from the one most people carry around. Now, that doesn't mean the job's soft. No, not at all. Some of these case histories are frankly hard for most people to even imagine. Jesica mentioned that some of what she's seen and read has changed the way she moves through the world with her own children. It's made her more vigilant in public, more careful. And that part of the conversation really stayed with me because the stories made me think about who is around me and when I'm out. She also talked about a skill she didn't realize she had when she started, communication. And not just basic communication, but real, difficult, high-stakes conversation. The kind where you're sitting across from somebody trying to get them to understand that their behavior is destructive. Not just legally, but personally, relationally, and all of it. She said she's had grown men crying in her office during those conversations. And to me, that's one of those hidden parts of the work people probably don't think about. Now, at this point, let's pause and put some structure around what Jesica described. Because on the surface, this looks like a desk job, but it's not a simple one. The first thing that stood out to me is the emotional weight that comes with it. You're dealing with people at low points of their lives, potentially addiction, bad decisions, sometimes really serious crimes. And even if you learn to separate from it, you're still sitting in those conversations every day. On the board, that emotional load comes in at a 7 out of 10. Right alongside that is the level of responsibility. Everything you document, every decision you make, and every step you take on a case, it can affect someone's freedom, their future, and of course public safety. That consequence pressure is pretty high. This is ranked at an 8 out of 10. Now, what surprised me a little bit was for a job that's as structured as this one, there's actually a decent amount of independence in how you operate. You're managing your caseload, setting your schedule, and deciding how to approach different situations within the rules. So autonomy here comes in at a 7 out of 10. And speaking of schedule, this is one of the areas where the job gives something back. Compared to something like policing, her hours are stable. She has control over how she structures her day, when she schedules appointments, and when she handles paperwork. So schedule control and stability both land at about an 8 out of 10. But then there's the part that ties all of this together. You can't coast in this job. There's too much to track, too much that can fall through the cracks, too much that depends on you staying organized and on top of things. So the internal drive required to do this well, that's high. That's an 8 out of 10. So when you step back and look at it, this isn't just a job where a probation officer simply monitors people. It's structured but demanding, emotionally steady, but it's not light. And it requires someone who can stay organized, consistent, and firm every single day. Now, where she lives, probation and parole officers earn in the upper $40,000 range to start, with supervisors around $55,000. Now, advancement does exist, but she made it sound like it was pretty limited because openings don't happen constantly and promotions often depend on positions becoming available. So this doesn't sound like a career you get into because of huge money upside. It sounds more like a service job with real responsibility and modest pay. Entry difficulty seemed fairly manageable. In her state, a degree isn't required, which lowers the barrier compared to some law enforcement or casework roles. Still, the job seems to reward backgrounds in policing, social work, mental health, or other related fields. And if somebody leaves this career, the skills do transfer very well. She pointed to things like juvenile probation and parole, social work, child protective services, and other types of policing. And that makes sense. What you're really building here is a mix of all of the same types of skills. So, who's right for this career? From everything Jessica described, this seems like a fit for someone who wants to be in public safety, but not necessarily on the street. Someone who can handle paperwork and who's highly organized. Someone who can stay composed around difficult people. Sometimes who can be patient but not naive. Firm and not cruel. Who probably struggles here? Someone disorganized. Someone who wants excitement. Someone who avoids difficult conversations, or somebody who takes every case home with them and can't find a way to mentally separate the work from the rest of their lives. Because the deeper reality of this career is, it's not about trying to send people back to prison. It's about managing people and expectations, and documenting everything, making careful decisions, and trying to hold the line between accountability and rehabilitation. That's what I came away with after talking to Jessica. And for the right person, this is meaningful work. Lastly, Jessica, thank you so much for taking time with me, taking me through your world and sharing what this job really looks like for all of us. We all truly appreciate it. Thank you.